Welcome to this explainer. If you love dissecting complex systems and really understanding the hidden mechanics behind major global events, you are in exactly the right place today. We're breaking down a really fascinating piece of source material that unpacks a very specific and honestly highly debated moment in financial history. We're talking about Elon Musk becoming the world's first trillionaire following SpaceX's IPO in June 2026. We're going to map out the exact arguments and data points the source video uses to explain how this actually happened. And just to be clear, our goal here is strictly analytical. We're taking a completely neutral, reporting stance to help you visualize and comprehend the really bold claims this creator makes about modern wealth creation. All right, let's dive right in. Here is our agenda for today. First, visualizing a trillion. Second, the illusion of paper wealth. Third, selling dreams over fundamentals. Fourth, the buy, borrow, die strategy. Fifth, politics, lobbying, and wealth. And finally, number 6, the societal impact.
Section 1. Visualizing $1 trillion. The scale of extreme wealth.
So the source material grounds its whole argument in that exact moment Musk crossed the $1 trillion threshold on the NASDAQ. But let's be real. How do we actually comprehend a number with 12 zeros? Time is actually a great analogy here. 1,000,000 seconds, that is just under 12 days. 1,000,000,000 seconds is about 32 years. But 1 trillion seconds? That literally rewinds the clock 31,000 years. We're talking back when humans were still figuring out cave paintings. The source uses this vivid comparison to establish a baseline. $1 trillion isn't just more money, it is a fundamentally different scale of existence. I mean, it's currently larger than the GDP of most countries on Earth.
Section 2. The illusion of paper wealth. Liquid cash versus stock value.
Okay, so what does it actually mean to have $1 trillion? As the creator points out, it absolutely doesn't mean having a $1 trillion checking account. Musk reportedly holds only about 0.1% of his wealth in liquid cash. The other 99.9%? It's entirely tied up in shares, specifically an estimated 38% stake in SpaceX and a 15 to 25% stake in Tesla. This fortune is actually highly fragile. It is paper wealth. If he were to suddenly sell off massive amounts of those shares to get actual cash, it would flood the market, panic investors, and completely crash the value of the companies. So the crucial takeaway here is that this $1 trillion figure is largely a collective illusion. It's completely dependent on the daily mood of the stock market.
Section 3. Selling dreams over fundamentals. Valuations versus reality.
Now, if paper wealth is based on market mood, what dictates that mood? The source references economist Burton Malkiel's castles in the air theory. Traditional investing usually looks at a company's profit and revenue, right? Its firm foundation. But the castles in the air theory suggests that investors often just buy into psychological value. They buy the dreams and the visions being sold with the hope of selling those dreams to someone else later for a higher price. The analysis asserts that Musk's companies are absolute masterclasses in this theory, essentially selling grand visions of the future rather than current financial stability. Let's look at how the source backs up that claim. They track a history of highly publicized promises versus their actual outcomes as of 2026. Remember the 600-mile-per-hour Hyperloop promised back in 2013? Well, the concept failed and the company wound up a decade later. Fully autonomous driving promised in 2015, still not fully realized 11 years later. 1 million robo-taxis by 2020? None actually materialized by 2026. Humans to Mars within 10 to 12 years of 2014? No realistic plans currently in action. This pattern of unmet promises perfectly aligns with what Harvard Business School professor Mihir Desai calls a financial cult, where just the association with a visionary name outweighs the actual delivery of a product. And this pattern of selling visions builds directly into the creator's main argument about the SpaceX IPO. They highlight a really stark contrast. We are looking at a $2.2 trillion valuation at the time of the 2026 IPO, despite the company operating at a $5 billion loss the previous year. To put that into perspective, the research firm Morningstar valued SpaceX much lower, at around $780 billion. This suggests the market price was vastly inflated by hype rather than actual earnings.
The original research emphasizes this market frenzy by quoting investor Steve Eisman. You might know him as the guy famous for predicting the 2008 financial crisis. Eisman characterized the SpaceX valuation as pure madness. He called it an IPO of a sci-fi story tailor-made for a sci-fi cult. To infinity and beyond, or in this case to Mars. It really perfectly encapsulates the source's central premise. The $1 trillion mark was driven by narrative, not by numbers.
Section 4. The buy, borrow, die strategy.
demystifying the tax loophole. Shifting gears from corporate valuations over to personal finance, how do the ultra-rich actually use all this paper wealth? Well, the source points to a wealth management tactic known as buy, borrow, die. It relies on a pretty simple premise. You're only taxed on income, or when you sell an asset for a profit, which is known as capital gains, but if you never sell the asset, you never pay the tax.
The original research breaks this complex tax loophole down into a simple three-step playbook. Step 1. Buy and hold the shares as they appreciate in value, which triggers zero tax. Step 2. Borrow against those shares. The creator cites a major example where Musk allegedly mortgaged $62.5 billion in Tesla shares just to secure a $12.5 billion bank loan in cash to buy Twitter. Because loans are not legally income, no tax is paid. And finally, step 3, die and inherit. Under certain U.S. tax rules, when the wealth is passed down to children, the cost basis is stepped up. This essentially means the capital gains tax just disappears.
To really drive home the impact of this strategy, the source presents a pretty jarring statistic, 3.2%. Between 2014 and 2018, Musk's wealth increased by nearly $14 billion, yet his effective tax rate on all that growth was just 3.2%. The creator sharply contrasts this with the 20 to 30% income tax rate paid by the average American working-class citizen, framing this as a massive systemic imbalance.
Section 5. Politics, Lobbying, and Wealth, the political catalysts. This brings us to what is arguably the most heavily charged assertion in the source material, the idea that extreme wealth is actively protected and inflated through political leverage. The creator draws a very direct correlation between political donations and net worth, noting a reported $290 million donation to Donald Trump's 2024 presidential campaign. Following that election, the source points out that Musk's net worth, which sat at $270 billion prior, actually increased five-fold within just 2 years under the new administration. The video suggests this was a direct return on political investment. The source material also points to international maneuvering. They map out a rapid succession of events starting in February 2025 with a meeting between India's Prime Minister Modi and Musk. This was swiftly followed by phone calls, letters of intent, and by June 2025, Starlink secured a highly coveted satellite internet license in India. The chronology then jumps to June 2026, leading right up to massive regulatory shifts for the SpaceX IPO.
Looking specifically at those regulatory shifts, the explainer alleges that totally unprecedented favors were tailored for this IPO. It claims NASDAQ introduced a fast entry rule, reducing the typical waiting period from months to just 15 days, which resulted in millions of Americans' retirement and pension funds being automatically invested. Furthermore, the source asserts the SEC actually excused brokers from safe account rules just 2 days prior, and notes that a major rival, EchoStar, suddenly faced federal investigations. The creator emphatically argues that $70 billion of public stock market money was put at risk simply to finalize this trillionaire status.
Section 6. The societal impact, the broader economic perspective. Pulling back to look at the macroeconomic picture, the creator uses UN World Food Program data to highlight a really stark contrast. An estimated $40 billion per year could theoretically eliminate world hunger by 2030. Compare that to a single individual's net worth of $1 trillion. The original research uses this to argue that just a fraction of this newly minted paper wealth could solve massive global crises. It raises some deep questions about the systems that allow such accumulation while fundamental global needs just go unmet. Which leaves us with a really provocative question based on the source's analysis. Is $1 trillion valuation a genuine reflection of human innovation and progress,